Thank you all for coming. I'm Pat. Only briefly, I'm going to talk about myself, only briefly. I'm a development manager at Coolblue, a company based here in Rotterdam. I've been coding for a very long time, .NET developer for a very long time. Father and husband, originally Australian, that's where the accent comes from. My Dutch is good enough. Yeah. Good enough by my standards. If you ask my Dutch colleagues, probably not so much. If you want to hit me up afterwards, you can hit me up on Twitter or via email. Both of those work there. Obviously, Coolblue, I'm not going to lie, right? Coolblue gives me this opportunity to come and stand in front of you, and some of you have an interest in my talk solely because of the mention of Coolblue. So before I go much further, how many of you have bought something from Coolblue? Yeah, I'm talking to a Dutch audience. That's an easy question, right? How many of you haven't? Okay, at least a few. Nice. All right, I'm talking to you guys at the back then. Okay, Coolblue, based here in Rotterdam, we do, for those of you that have bought something from us, this is pretty self-explanatory. We do anything for a smile. We want to make customers happy. That's our primary goal. And that's not just an external goal. If you think of customers as your colleagues, as your peers, as your co-workers, that's also something that we have internally as well, right? You want to work with your peers to make them smile. All right? So it's not just an external story that I'm going to tell you today. Coolblue is relatively successful, at least since correlation and causation. There's a joke to be made about correlation and causation because they hired me about here. But that's all jokes aside. Like we've had some great success, and I'm very proud of it, of being able to share these numbers with you. It makes us the largest consumer electronics supplier in the Benelux region, which I'm also very happy about, obviously. And the dev teams, which is the most of my history at Coolblue, the dev teams have grown and grown and grown. Every 18 months, we've basically doubled in size. The dev team, or the tech department itself now is about 300 people with about 240-something developers. Okay, it's a bit hard to narrow down an exact number for you, but at the start of this week there were 242. So that's, but it's constantly changing, right? Just like Coolblue, just like the market, just like what each and every one of you as customers ask of us, we need to change, and Coolblue is always changing and growing. Today I'm talking on the future teams track, right? And I'm going to share some stories about myself. And I love the description that they used of the Future Teams track, which is this one here. The most obvious task of a developer involves coding, but in reality, it takes much, much more to be a capable developer. And that's kind of an underlying theme of the talk that I've got today. Hopefully, I can show you through my examples and my failures, opportunities to learn and become a much more capable developer. That's my goal. So that in the future you on your future team, will be a very capable developer. That's my goal for today. I learn through books. Right? I've tried Pluralsight, I've tried a whole bunch of other ways of learning. I've been to university for most of a degree, but for me, books is where it's at. So today I'm going to be giving you a bunch of book recommendations. Please, I'll make the slides available after. If you're interested, hopefully these aren't the common books. I was having a chat with someone in the break, and they said, oh, do you mention The Pragmatic Programmer? Because that's probably a really good one for you. And I said, well, no, it's not in the slide deck, but I would assume that, well, before I assume, because assumptions are the mother of certain things, how many of you are developers or have a development background? Yeah, so most of you, I would assume, have heard of The Pragmatic Programmer, so I'm going to skip that one. But there's a whole bunch of other books in here that I hope you'll enjoy. I'm going to start with this one. This, for me, was the catalyst of this whole talk, and basically where I got the title from as well. What got you here won't get you there. It's not necessarily a story that you would think about, or a book that you would think about gifting a developer, or a developer team lead, or a principal architect, or whatever all of your titles are. It's not necessarily something that you would put in your bookshelf. But for me, the key quote, and the reason the catalyst for this talk, was that looking backwards is not about creating change. There's nothing we can do to change what we have done, which is why I'm happy to share with you the stories of my failures. It's about understanding, and I would add to that, probably improving and growing, right? Doing things differently in the future. So what got you here to today? What got you the NS, presumably, or some form of public transport, because we're in the Netherlands. So what got you here won't necessarily get you to the next level, won't get you to where you want to be, and that's a capable developer on a capable team working in the future. Yeah, future teams, lots of fun. So for me, that's, the whole title of the talk, from developer to development manager. What got me into a development role, and then into a team lead role, and now as a development manager role, which is a team lead of team leads, basically. My job is to buy beer and pizza and make sure that everything's on time. That's basically it. And hire right people and do a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're interested, come see me after, but that's not the point of this talk. For me, the more things have changed through my career, the more they've stayed the same, at least for these few points that I'm going to show you today and the stories that I want to share with you. It's about creating that common understanding. It's about understanding the mistakes that you've made and moving forward, or failing forward, as I'll mention later. I'm going to do that by sharing 4 stories with you today. These 4 stories are really simple examples I hope you can relate to. I'll ask as we go along. Please let me know if I'm mentioning things that are way too far out of date. But we're going to be talking about listening. How do we listen or not? Ownership, failing, and assisting others. Right? There are stories that I have from my past that address each and every one of these topics. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. So the structure that I'm using so that you understand how I'm going to talk about these topics is I'm going to put a tweet in there. Now, I said I'm an avid reader of books. I'm also an avid Twitter reader, not necessarily a tweeter myself, but I do enjoy reading a lot of other people's wisdom, and not to fool you into thinking that Twitter is where wisdom is at, but, you know, there are some little nuggets that I find every so often, so I normally put a tweet up. It gives you guys exposure to another person that you may not have heard of, but also, it helps support my story and gives us a good base to start from. I then go on and tell you a story. I'll leave an emoji or some sort of a pictogram up on the screen while I'm telling you that so that it's not as distracting, and you get to focus on me, which is the arrogance, egotistical part of the room, which I'm convinced is why they put me in the big room. And then finally, I'll give you, like I said, the book recommendation, right? The title and the authors, you can look them up after. If you've got any questions about them, come see me. And more importantly, I'll try and feature a key quote from the book. So the biggest takeaway that I got out of it and how I think it relates. So let's start with listening. Erin, you guys may not have interacted with her previously, but if she tweeted, and this was November last year, if you got into programming because you thought you wouldn't have to interact with other people, I'm sorry. Someone lied to you. How many of you are on single developer teams? How many of you are working by yourself? A few, okay. How many of you on those single person teams don't have to talk to anyone else to get anything done? No one, right? We're all here, we all get paid, someone somewhere finances what we do because we're interacting with people. And so I have a fun story that dates back to before I understood that concept. All right. If we go back to when I was a junior dev, and this is probably showing off some of my age, we had a database at the time, some version of SQL Server before they started using years, and I wanted to put a stopwatch around it. I overheard, the reason that I wanted to put a stopwatch and time some of the database queries is because I overheard a product owner, we didn't call them product owners at the time, but I overheard a product owner talking to our chief architect. He wasn't called that at the time either, but I overheard these two people talking about why is there slowness? Where does this slowness come from? Why are these queries taking so long? Why each day do the results come in later and later and later, right? Common business problem from my now understanding, but at the time as a junior dev being super eager to prove myself and wanting to jump in and do my fair share, I thought to myself, this is going to be easy. We have, it's a .NET project, and back then, dependency injection wasn't necessarily a thing, so we didn't even have interface. We just had an abstract base class called data access, lots of fun, that did all our database operations. So I thought, being the junior dev that I was, this is going to be great. I'm going to show them next time the product owner comes around with a question about why is it slow, I can actually show them where it's slow, which query is taking the longest time. And so I added a stopwatch to this class, and I wrapped a bunch of the transactional items. And for those of you that groaned, you can kind of guess where this is going. But I released that into our production environment because I was working at a startup before they were called startups. It was just small businesses, and I was able to work by myself because it was autonomous, even though I was junior. Another mistake we can talk about later. The impact that had on our production environment wasn't nice. Right? How many of you have done something similar to this? How many of you have wrapped some sort of database access? It had some sort of follow-on effect, and then all of a sudden downstream nothing works anymore. Where did all the RAM go? Why is the CPU spinning endlessly? Right? Why are transactions now blocking? Right? Why isn't anything getting rolled back properly because the stopwatch happened to be in scope? This all went down and caused significant downtime for that organization and could have been solved if I'd spoken. So I overheard a conversation between a product owner and an architect. It didn't involve me, and I wanted to prove myself. And eagerness and willingness and drive are things that we all want in our teammates, in our peers, in our colleagues. But I didn't discuss my plans with anybody. I had the opportunity, and that was an opportunity, to make the changes that I wanted to make myself and push them into an environment that they probably shouldn't have gone in if anyone had actually reviewed those changes. And I did all that all that happened, the impact of that happened because I didn't communicate. I didn't talk to my lead, I didn't talk to the product owner. We didn't even discuss this. It turned out later that the product hadn't even been getting slower, and the conversation that I'd overheard was perception rather than actual fact. So I brought the company down for 3 days at the time because of this relatively small change. I think it was 4 or 5 lines that went into production because I didn't talk with anybody. So my recommendation to all of you is to have these conversations. Right? You're going to be working on teams now, even those of you that are working by yourselves. You're going to be working on teams. You're going to have peers, you're going to have colleagues, you're going to have product owners and business stakeholders and all these types of people. You're going to have these people around you. Please make sure you understand the intent. Please make sure you understand what they're trying to achieve, why they're trying to achieve it. And maybe if you've got someone to bounce your technical solution off, you share that with them, right? You ask them for their opinion on these things. There's a good reason that the 4 O's principle exists. The book that I wish I'd had at that point in time that covers this quite well is called Becoming a Better Programmer. It's not that old. It's 5 or 6 years old now, I think. I haven't double-checked the dates of this. I should have in preparation for the talk. But this book covers off a whole bunch of topics, more than you would expect. Right? More than just code complete or pragmatic programmer. This goes deeper into communication, into teamwork, into organizational theory in some parts. The quote that I've got out of there, the part that really drove this story home for me, was that good programmers are good communicators. They talk, write, code, listen, and read well. And code, which if we go back to the future tech definition of a future team, right, and programmer's primary responsibility, code for him, in this quote, is right in the middle of the sentence and equally weighted as talking and writing and reading and listening. And I think we should really consider that. We should really take that into consideration. Okay? Coding is one very small part of the job that you, each of you, and me, is paid. Well, not necessarily code for me, but the rest of it is certainly what we're paid to do. Okay? That's my story about listening, and now I want to talk about ownership. How many of you feel in your current team or your current situation that you have the opportunity to own what you're working on, what you're delivering, what you're doing? About half. Okay. Yeah, you two that are working by yourself, I would expect so, yeah. If you're working on a team of 1 and you don't have ownership, that's probably scarier. But for the probably half of you that raised your hand, right, hopefully this lands well with you. How many of you know who Nick Craver is? A few, okay. How many of you know what Stack Overflow is? Yeah, come on, every hand. There we go. So Nick Craver is the principal architect or technical lead, or he's got some title that he doesn't really care for at Stack Overflow. The biggest, most amazing part that I've seen him contribute publicly has been his ownership of outages. All right? Now you can imagine Stack Overflow, one of the, let's say, more important websites for all of us. It's pretty impactful when that goes down. And so you'll see the Stack Exchange status bot paste a, sorry, we're currently investigating. Oh, I don't know if it's a bot or not, but it's pretty generic, what it normally posts. And if you look into the replies of the Stack Exchange status post, you'll always see Nick, right? Or maybe someone from his team, because he's delegating a bit more of this stuff now. And he jumps in, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the topic is or what the connection is or the story that he's trying to tell here, but it's just he jumps in and explains why. Right? So the first line is the what, and nearly every time that I've checked, he jumps in with a why, which is amazing. And then, in terms of ownership, I don't know if you can make this out at the back, but right at the bottom, he normally comes back and closes out the case as well, for those of you that are interested in following along on Twitter as to where the outage, what the outage was, how it was caused, how it was fixed. He normally comes back as well and posts what the resolution was, which is really interesting for a website of that size, or operating at that scale. For me, I have a similar story of ownership with the Vuvuzela. Now, this is a Dutch audience, so how many of you know what a Vuvuzela is? That's surprisingly more than I thought. Okay, this explains it better to most people that aren't as familiar with it. But the Vuvuzela is a horn. It produces a note roughly around B flat, not exactly B flat, as I came to learn, but roughly around B flat, and it's horrible. Full stop. Punz, yeah, it's horrible. For me, the story that surrounds the Vuvuzela is that of the World Cup, where the first time that I think most of you guys and girls would have been exposed to it as well, in 2010, South Africa, when they held the World Cup there, it was introduced to the stadium as a promotional item, I think, by Coca-Cola. I don't know why. I still, to this day, don't understand the idea behind that marketing exec, or what they were thinking, but this tool was given to the audience, and they played it long and loud. I was currently working for another startup, a small company in Sydney, and we had the exclusive rights to provide to our second largest telecom provider the mobile stream of the games. Every game, every World Cup game was able to be streamed to the customers of the second largest telecommunications provider in the country. And that was a massive grab for them because they were the second largest, but they obviously had aspirations. And so they thought, if we can get the World Cup and we can stream it for free, and this is 2010, so we're talking BlackBerry, Nokia, we're not necessarily talking iPhone proliferation the way that it is now. And so our job at that company was to transcode this live stream that we got from FIFA, or through the SBS at that time. But through FIFA, we got a raw video feed, and we needed to transcode that into about 14 different formats and push it out, make streaming links available for all these different types of phones. And that was something that we were really good at. We had all sorts of, very, very quick, near real-time video transcoding apps available to us, or functions available to us. But unfortunately, if you're watching the 2010 World Cup and you get it streamed for free, so you want to watch it, and in Australia that's quite ill-timed, because for us, being on the other side of the world, far enough away from South Africa, most of these games are being played in the early hours of the morning, or while you're sitting on public transport going to work, not necessarily in the middle of the day or in prime time, like you probably would have experienced. So having a B-flat drone in the back of every headphone user, because you're probably lying in bed watching this at 3 a.m., or you're sitting on the train at 7 a.m., having a B-flat note drone over the voice of the commentators and over the voice of the whole game was just horrible, right? We watched, through the analytics, we watched users come in and bounce out almost immediately because you just can't have that sort of a drone, and it was very hard to do anything with it. We spoke to FIFA at the time and said, hey, the video stream you're giving us is horrible. It's got this horrible off B-flat noise over the top of everything. Can you do something about it? It's on your stream. And this story is about ownership, so I think you can imagine what happened next. FIFA said, no, not our problem. That's the noise that comes out of the stadium. That's what you paid for. You paid to get the video and the audio from the stadiums itself. This is what's happening in the stadium. So congratulations. If you want to do something about it, feel free. But that's not our problem. We're not going to fix that for you. If we jump back into the real-time transcoders that we had, it didn't take us long to write a filter, a line pass filter equivalent, to pull out that frequency with a very small impact on the commentators and the voices that were over the football, but it almost completely pulled out the noise of the horn over the frequency. For us, taking that ownership, even though we didn't need to, even though we probably shouldn't have, and it turns out 3 days later, to spoil the punchline, 3 days later, FIFA got enough international complaints that I'm hoping that most of you, for those of you that can remember back that far watching it, didn't need to deal with this after like day 3 or day 4, and for the grand final, this problem didn't exist. But for us in Sydney, that was a problem for those 3 or 4 days there. We had the second largest telecom provider putting pressure on us, saying we need something done, and there was no opportunity for us to pass that responsibility along. Ownership for me is about taking that responsibility, and that's what we did in this instance. So this turned out successfully. Yay, this story's about success, not about failure. Nice change for me. But there are so many, what I want you to do is think about where you can not just pass the blame along and say, look, that team is blocking me, or that opportunity isn't available to me because that person stopped it, where you can take that ownership for yourself, okay? Where you have opportunities in your daily work to empower yourself to make these changes. Sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. All right. Sorry. I'll try and get through the slides a bit faster so the screensaver doesn't kick in. For me, the biggest book that contributed to this and helped me distill this in my mind was a book written by Jocko Willink, who's a Navy SEAL, a very aggressive gentleman, but a very good leader, very distinctive leader. And he writes about extreme ownership. He's got a new book that came out. I haven't updated the slides. He's got a new book that came out only last month, or maybe at the end of last year, actually, about ownership. But he talks very heavily about ownership in a military context. And it's an amazing story, the way that he manages to put the leadership lessons alongside his military experience. Obviously, as a military man, or as a Navy man, he's got a very distinctive, very direct way of speaking. And so for him, it's not what was preached at him or what was preached towards him in his role, but it's what he was willing to tolerate. In my story, we weren't willing to tolerate that B-flat noise, and we did something about it. I don't know what you, each and every one of you, is tolerating in your day-to-day job, but you tolerating that is the inverse definition of ownership, right? You're not taking responsibility for that. You're not taking ownership for that. So if I can give you any sort of action from this sort of section of the talk, please go back to your desks, maybe next week if you've got the rest of the week off. Think about opportunities for you to introduce ownership into your code bases, your applications, your situations, your teams, okay? My favorite. This is genuinely my favorite part of the talk, and something that I'm proud to admit I do all the time, failing. So Matt is a VP engineering. He's a relatively smart guy that talks about leadership. If you guys want to follow the links later, please feel free. He tweeted just recently, November, that the apprentice knows they need to go on a journey, but the master knows that the journey never ends. So developers know that you need to learn new technologies. That's kind of why you're all here today, right? To learn new things, to expand your horizons. But to truly understand and to have a firm grasp of your own education, you know that it's never going to end. Now, by definition, because you're in the audience here, you know that you need to keep this continuous learning up. Right? You requested to come here, or you paid for your ticket to get here, and this is part of your journey. all right? Part of my journey, and this is where Coolblue comes into the picture, was a fun story about €0 microwaves. So, how many of you are from Coolblue? How many of you had bought something from Coolblue? Everyone, right? Nearly everyone, except for, I think, 4 or 5 guys in the back, for some reason. I'll talk to you after. How many of you have bought a microwave from Coolblue? A few. How many of you have bought a microwave for €0 from Coolblue? No one. All right, I'm still trying to find the one guy. So that's the punchline of the story. Let me rewind, though. At Coolblue, a few years ago, I was a team lead of the pricing team. I started as a developer in the pricing team, dealing with automated pricing, and moved into the team lead of that team relatively quickly. The work that was being done by that team was to automate the prices of Coolblue, right, in a semi-autonomous fashion, within certain bounds, all the rest of it, as you would expect, so there's not some crazy race to the bottom or crazy overinflation because someone's selling an iPhone for €10,000. So there had to be some rules around it. Now, one thing that I found, and I have a bit of a background in economic theory or pricing, specifically in pricing models, one of the things that I found absolutely interesting, say, about this, the Dutch culture and the Dutch way of thinking, is that you provide gratis matches, right? You provide free widths. I don't really understand it, but it's like a bonus item. How many of you don't speak Dutch? Yes. So me doing this in English is justified. Thank you, thank you. So basically, Dutch people, Dutch organizations, especially in the fields of consumer electronics or Albert Heijn even, like your local supermarket, they throw in free widths, add-on products, right? So you buy a phone, you'll get a phone case. And you don't price that phone case into the price of the phone, because that would be changing the price of the phone depending on the other items you bought it for, which Dutch law says is a no-no, right? You can't artificially modify prices of objects because of who the customer is or other things they've purchased previously, right? You can offer discount, that's fine. So what you need to do is you need to offer that telephone holder, that telephone case, at €0. So we had all this programmed in, and when I was a developer in the team, we had all this pricing logic. It took up a wall, probably the size of one of these. It was massive, and we had a special little use case that if it was in this product category, gratis matches or free add-ons, it was allowed to be priced at €0. Everything else, no. Right? Obviously, you don't want to sell anything at €0 if you can avoid it. Right? It produced some other weird edge cases of people trying to price things at plus 1 cent and minus 1 cent, but that was different. So €0 had this special little use case, like if you're in this product category, you're allowed to be priced at €0, and that will go through the automation. That'll be fine, because the use case was phones with phone cases, or washing machines with detergent, right? A packet of laundry detergent. That sort of stuff gets thrown in all the time. And then someone came along later and was refactoring some of the code and went, oh, this is a weird if statement, right? We moved from a manual process where every price ended up under manual review, so it would have been caught anyway. We were moving much more towards semi-autonomous, or automation, which is another key topic of today. And a lot of these decisions were being reevaluated. Right? Why does it need to be? It wasn't that the if statement was weird, because you can imagine as developers that if there's code there, it lives there for a reason. Right? Someone somewhere at some point made a decision to write that line of code, so there must be a story behind it, or so the theory goes. There was no question about why we were stopping people from pricing things at €0. There was a question about why you had to be within this nested product category. So what they did is they said, no product can ever be priced at €0. Easy, right? So how did we manage to sell microwaves for a very short period of time for €0? Yeah. When you're rolling things out at scale, and certain subsets of rules get applied to automated processes, these things don't scale so well. It cost us a lot of time in postmortems or in technical retrospectives, trying to figure out exactly how this happened. And to this day, Sorry, it'll come back on in a second. But to this day, we still don't understand how these microwaves got to €0. The funny part of the story, and the reason that I ask you to raise your hand if you've ever bought a microwave for €0 before, is because I'm still trying to find the one guy that bought 26 industrial microwaves for €0 and got them delivered to our store. Remember, right back at the start, I said, Coolblue, Alistair Glimlock, right? Coolblue, anything for a smile. We will do anything to help you. This guy got 26 industrial microwaves delivered to a store. One of our stores. It's a valid proposition. We allow you to pick products up from our stores. Hired a truck, backed it up to the store and said, hey, look, these are kind of heavy. Can you guys give me a hand? Anything for a smile. We picked a whole bunch of people up off the floor, helped him load 26 microwaves into the back of his van and said, okay, you've got the invoice, you've got the products, your name matches, everything's good, have fun, have a good day, goodbye. It was hours later before we realized what the actual, that there had been an incident. And in the true Coolblue fashion, we were able to get most of these back off the gentleman who understood that it was a mistake, and Coolblue has other ways of helping him. I think he got to keep one or two of them, but that's lost to rumor now. So basically, my point is this was a very expensive mistake for us. These microwaves were industrial microwaves. They were thousands, possibly tens of thousands of euros for these devices. And it's all because we didn't take the time to look and pay attention to what was actually, why things were there. We didn't analyze history, right? But instead of worrying about, okay, well, we need to second guess every decision from this point on, right? We're in the pricing team. There's lots of decisions. We need to second guess every single one of them. Instead, I love this about Coolblue. We embraced a fail forward type methodology. Has anybody worked in an environment where you get to fail forward? A few. Cool. Those are the best, right? For those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about with fail forward, this book will really help you understand the concept. Basically, you need to fail early and fail often. Don't be afraid of it. Make mistakes. I went out there, I tried to shut the door. Yeah, see, I get to stitch this in. I went out there, I tried to shut the door, it didn't work. I tried it for 30 seconds, I came back in and apologized to you guys. I wasn't ashamed of that. It was a mistake, right? But we failed forward, and then somehow the doors closed, so thanks for that, guys. No idea how that happened, right? But the doors closed themselves. I made a mistake, we failed forward. Yeah? You combine this with ownership, and you combine this with understanding, and hopefully a understanding of where you've come from, so history as well, that all forms a part. And then this becomes a methodology, a mantra, a component of your team, right? Blameless postmortem. Who's heard of blameless postmortems? Big thing at the moment going around about how cool blameless postmortems are. That's just another example, right? You're trying to figure out the root cause of an issue, and then you can move on, and just don't repeat the same mistake, ideally. If you repeat the same mistake, you need to have a postmortem about the postmortem, and that's not fun. So that's failure. I'm moving quite quickly. I know that it's after lunch, but yeah, stick with me. We've got one more to go. This is about assisting, right? Assisting others, elevating others to the level that you are. So this is now a later part of my career. This is now, when I'm starting to research things like management. What is this whole management thing anyway? This is Julie. Julie is a product design VP at Facebook, but she's also got some really good ideas on leadership and management. Her book should be out this month, which is why I picked this one. I would advise you to read this as well and have a look at what her concepts of management and leadership are about. For me, the easiest way that I have to assist people, and this is going to get a little bit, I found out now, controversial. The easiest way that I found when I was moving from a team lead or an individual contributor role into a management role was to very clearly document my decisions. As a developer, how many of you have worked with architectural decision records or ADRs? A few, a fair few. Okay, cool. Basically, you want to try and write down as much of the reasoning behind your decisions as possible so that future people or your colleagues or people from another team can come in and figure out why you did the things that you did, which is the hardest question to answer. So I started doing that. I started writing my management handbook, right? And the details of it aren't necessarily important. but it's my way to say, this is how I interact with people, this is how I work, these are my expectations towards people, and also this is what you can expect from me. So that's the other way, all right? I found out now that this is controversial because how many of you have heard of management readmes? None. Technical readmes, personal readmes? None. Okay, a few. Basically, there's this whole big Twitter storm in a teacup thing going on at the moment where readmes are bad because it's a manager substituting a document for a conversation. Okay? This is not what this was intended for. I never meant to substitute my decisions for a conversation. And that was made clear to me by Arno, an engineering manager that's based in Amsterdam, good guy. He tweeted this not so long ago. He said, I had my first one-on-one meeting with a new, very senior member of my team. And he came in with a very short document that explained how he understands his role, what's expected from him, what he is and isn't good at, what gives him energy or drains his energy, and what he expects from me as a manager. And it was super simple and super effective. And I've done basically the same with my management README. Sorry, let me go back here. This is basically what this document is. It's a way for me to share with my team and my team leads and my team members, the developers in the team as well. This is a public document. It's linked here. You can go and read about how I like to manage people, if that so interests you. But this is a way for us to make clear our expectations. All right? How many of you in a development role have had to handle incorrect expectation management, if I phrase it like that? How many of you have had a product owner saying, where is this, right? Or why isn't this done? Or you said it would be, right? For me, this is exactly the same, but on a management level, right? I think that developers, senior developers, architects, people that have very highly rated individual contributor roles, this is also still valuable for them, for each and every one of you. If you're one of these guys in the audience, this is important for you as well, right? Outlining what you're expected to do, what you expect from others, having this as, and this is not long. For me, this whole handbook, as I called it at the time, was like 8 pages, right? Broken up into a bunch of sections. It's got images and GIFs and stuff all through it because that's how I act. Immature, some say, that's fine. I'm fine with that. This is who I am, and this makes clear my expectations. You can do that with your team as well, okay? If you and your future team handle your expectations, my opinion now, if you and your future team are able to handle expectations between each other, you're going to be in a much better position to become a high-performing team. How many of you saw Tom and Thomas's high-performing teams talk earlier? A fair few. Nice. I was hoping that there would be that following the flow of the future teams thread. What do you call that? Yeah. The concepts that they were talking about in their team, I completely agree with. They had some great points. They've got a book out here on their stand talking about that stuff in more detail. If you didn't pick one up at the end of the talk, go see them. But for me, this is where it starts from. Understanding yourself, understanding what you expect from yourself and what you expect from others is equally as important. So for me, the book recommendation that I have for handling this, for starting this for you all, is Spark. All right? A leader, the quote that I got from this, the reason that it resonated so well with me is because a leader is someone who influences outcomes. I don't really know about the inspiring others bit because that's putting responsibility on you. Hopefully that's what I've done today, but I'll see that in the feedback forms. But influencing outcomes is very, very important. You are in control of influencing your own outcome. So those are the 4 stories I had for you today. This, for me, wraps up and summarizes all of them. All right? On the back of this truck, we have our most valuable resource is 63 feet ahead, right? Obviously referring to the driver of the truck. The driver of the truck has taken ownership because he's still on site. I don't know if you can quite make him out, but he's there, down there in the dark, right? And he's made a monumental mistake, right? He's obviously learning. So the overarching lesson that I want to give each and every one of you, and I was just talking with someone on Twitter about this before, is that we are all learning. I've made mistakes up here today. I've made mistakes in my presentation. I made a mistake trying to shut the door, right? Just in the time that I've had to interact with you, I've made mistakes. We're all here, we're all learning. If you take that mindset into your next team or into your current team, I think that we're all going to be better off. Okay? For me, the takeaways, apart from the books, well, let's start with the books. I want you to read as much as you can. I've mentioned 5 of these in the talk today and used specific examples and quotes from them. There's also, if you're interested in management or moving from individual contributors to a management role, there's a Patrick Coors or Pat Coors book and Camille Fournier's book on, sorry, I'll get out of the way. There you go. A Guide to Navigating Growth and Change in Tech. These are really, really good reads, in my opinion. Right? If you've got more that you'd like to add to the list, please let me know. I'm always interested in what's next, reading another book. Find or create or work with someone or ask your manager for their README. Right? How, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a README. It doesn't necessarily have to be, this is what I do, this is what I expect. It doesn't need to be a markdown file, right? Mine happens to be, but it doesn't have to. It can be a Word doc, could be a scribble on a napkin, or more importantly, it can be a conversation. All right? So when I ask you here to ask or find or create your own README, document for yourself where you stand and have that conversation with those around you. A small little giveaway that I wanted to shoehorn into here is Lara Hogan has a manager Voltron, which is in terms of constructing a team and in terms of constructing a support center around you and yourselves. Yeah, it asks a bunch of questions, and you should be able to put a name in each of the boxes, right? If you can't, that's an area for you to improve, and you can go and look for that. All right? That's a fun little game to play if you're interested in doing some sort of self-introspection or figuring out, putting on paper where your support network is. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like I said to you before, we're wrapping up in the last few minutes. Bear with me. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And this is real Obama. This is real Obama's words. For those of you that saw the keynote, right? Like this is what he actually said. He said, "No one can do it for you." And he was talking about America at the time. This is in 2008-ish. He was talking about his presidency and what he wanted to achieve. He said, "No one can do it for you, but you also can't do it alone. You, each and every one of you, except for the 4 or 5 that raised your hands, are part of a team today. You will be part of a team in the future. Right? And if you're not part of a team, as in a team of developers, you will still be working with stakeholders. You cannot achieve success alone. Right? You can't become the greatest version of yourself alone. You need others." And so I'm really happy that you're in this thread today, learning about what it takes to be what it takes to contribute to a future team. So if you want to continue the discussion, I'll be here wandering around. You'll see me in other sessions. Also on Twitter, my email address, there's the obligatory come join me at Coolblue shout out, careers at Coolblue, and my personal site, which is, as per everybody's blog, severely under-maintained. So thank you very much.